Hey everyone, it's Friday. You know what that means. It's time for another double feature Friday. Except for this week, I'm doing something a little bit different and I'm going to be talking about 3 films. And those films are The Conjuring, The Conjuring 2, and The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. So let's get into it. First off, the naming scheme of this trilogy is really bad. I don't know whose idea it was to switch from The Conjuring 2 to The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, but why would you do that? Just call it The Conjuring 3. Keep it simple. But anyways, this is also obviously a departure from the films I usually talk about in that they're very contemporary. The first Conjuring film came out in 2013. And then I'm not sure when the second one came out, but the third one just came out last Friday, so 2021. But the thing is, the Conjuring films are really near and dear to my heart. I really enjoy the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. It's a great love story. I find their work in the paranormal field is really interesting. And I do get the sense that a lot of people don't like or trust the Warrens and they think that they were motivated by greed. I mean, it doesn't appear to be that way, but they're an interesting couple either way. This series is based on this real life couple who are paranormal investigators, and all 3 films sort of focus on 3 different stories or 3 different cases that they worked on that had involved paranormal activity. So the first film was based on a story of a family who is experiencing pretty extreme demonic activity in a new house that they had just moved into. These movies all take place in the 70s. So I think that's why I actually like these films, because I don't watch a lot of contemporary films. When I do, I guess usually I enjoy the ones that are kind of more period pieces a little bit more. Although I have to say, a lot of times a period piece type film, like these are set in the 70s, so that's what I'm talking about when it comes to period pieces. The 70s is an aesthetic that really appeals to me. That being said, I'd rather watch a movie that was made in the 70s than watch a movie that was made in 2013 that was, set in the 70s, but whatever, I digress. So yes, these movies take place in the 70s. I think the third one, maybe the 80s. But Ed and Lorraine go to help this family and all this crazy stuff happens. I love the first one. I think it was so well acted. Ed and Lorraine in all 3 films are played by Lorraine is played by Vera Farmiga and Ed is played by Patrick Wilson. I really like these actors as well, so I think that's why this series or this trilogy franchise kind of appeals to me. I think that they're both great, like charming, beautiful people. Actually, my one complaint is that I think Patrick Wilson is too good looking to play Ed Warren, especially in the third film. I feel like they did a good job of sort of aging Vera Farmiga up to like an appropriate age, but Patrick Wilson somehow is ageless and they try to make him look older, I think, by giving him a cane. Patrick Wilson, if you were really committed to this role of playing Ed Warren, you would have gained 50 pounds for this role, especially in this third film, because Ed Warren wasn't an unattractive guy, but he was definitely a lot heavier and he looked more like a normal person, and I find Patrick Wilson just looks too like a movie star. It's a really nitpicky complaint. So I think the reason why this trilogy works so well for me, or why I am so invested in it, is because of the love story between the 2. I think that it was also really well cast, but the first 2 films in this trilogy are so well laid out and you get to spend so much time with the family. Like the first film you spend, I think they're all around 2 hours long each. In the first film, I feel like you spend around an hour getting to know the family, seeing them in the house. You also spend a lot of time with Ed and Lorraine, kind of getting to know them. And then they sort of move into the house with the family, and it's so well written. You really get invested in the characters. The second film is the same way. The second film actually starts out with a long sequence, and it's honestly, in my opinion, one of the best sort of flashback vision sequences I've ever seen done in film. It's so interesting and really stuck with me. One of the sequences that I can most easily just sort of recall from memory, and my memory is terrible. So the second film starts with this long sequence of the Amityville horror shootings. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with Amityville. There's been many films made about this Amityville haunted house. It's a really interesting story. It's like probably one of the most well-known sort of haunted house stories in America, I would guess. I mean, I know it pretty well, so then I just assume everyone probably has heard of it, but maybe I'm wrong. Because that story has been done multiple times, I think they didn't want to really do a whole Conjuring film about it, but they wanted to include it because it is a big part of the Ed and Lorraine story. So the sequence starts out with a sort of like a seance type thing. I think they're in the house, and Lorraine, because she's clairvoyant, she kind of becomes the man who murdered his family. And in this sequence, she goes through the house with like a fake shotgun and shoots all. She gets to see how it all played out. But then you get to see how it all plays out. She's envisioning it as the actual murderer. I loved it. And then they go on to England, where there's a girl who's being possessed by an old man, but it's actually demonic possession. It's pretty crazy. There are some obvious creative liberties in both the first two films. There are things that I don't like also. The first film, I would say, I like the whole thing. It's sufficiently scary. These movies have a lot of maybe cheap jump scares, but I think they're really well done. The first film, my biggest complaint would be there's some not great maybe CGI scenes, but they're very short and they're not make it or break it for me. The second film has this character who's supposed to be sort of a demonic presence that is just so horrible. It's so cartoony, and I feel like it really takes away from the actual reality of the situation, and I really wish that wasn't in the film. I don't think they really need that, but it was a creative choice that someone made. And then the third film, okay, so the third film really suffers from not having James Wan directing it, and also it was a different writer. So the first two films were directed by James Wan and also written by these two brothers. I think their last name is Hayes. I can't remember their names, I'm sorry. The first two films were so wonderfully written. You really get to take your time with the families. You really get to take your time with the Warrens. I cried twice at the second movie because of like the characters. You really get to know them and love them, and it's just really heartwarming. And maybe it's nerdy to cry. Even I cried after when I was recounting part of it to my husband. The third film, unfortunately, doesn't really have any of that. Also, the format is different, so they decided to start with like the shocking horror kind of like exorcism scene. But I think how the movie suffers as a result of that is you don't care about these characters. You don't care about the kid who's possessed and being like torn apart by a demon or spirit or whatever. You don't care about his family who's helping him. I mean, you might care about the Warrens, but I feel like you're not back in that headspace yet. So it starts off with this exorcism. It was shocking or scary. I jumped quite a few times. I don't want to give away the plot of the movie. It's worth watching. I would say out of the three, I didn't really enjoy it. I hate to say this, but the writing, the dialogue was so terrible. It wasn't fun. I mean, in terms of like a horror movie, there were some fun scares. There were some all right visual effects. Lorraine and her wardrobe is my favorite out of all three. And I think it is kind of like the actual Lorraine style that she then carried on for the rest of her life. She had a really distinct style. There's one good thing that I can say about it. The dialogue was clunky. It felt like script writing 101. There were things that could have been set up as a mystery to kind of figure out or, you know, work through for a little bit, but anything that was set up like a question or mystery or why is this happening, it was answered in the next sentence. So there was no setup for anything. The characters in this film who are introduced, you really don't have a chance to even get to know or care about. There's one man who they introduced and you go back and see him again later in the film, and then something ends up happening to him, and to be honest, I didn't care at all. Yeah, I'm sad. I'm sad that James Wan didn't get a chance to direct this. It just seemed like he just really cared about the characters and knew how to sort of present Ed and Lorraine in a way to make them really sympathetic. In the third movie, it felt like that was kind of shoehorned in. They're trying to beat you over the head with it, with their love story, but it wasn't really that well written. And then on top of it, to have clunky dialogue, it seemed like Vera Farmiga, who I usually think is a really good actor, I don't know if she was just phoning it in. Her performance wasn't that great, but I don't know if it was just really based on the bad writing. Like maybe she just couldn't do anything else with what she was given. It's a shame. I wish that this movie had been better, the third one. The first two are really good. I would still say if you're interested in checking them out, they're worth a watch. They are each about 2 hours long. Even the third one, which I didn't enjoy that much, didn't feel that long. But I think it's partly because when I looked back on it later and I was thinking about it, I really couldn't remember that much that happened. It's just not memorable. I would give the first two films like a 4 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5. I don't know. It depends maybe on my mood. They're scary. They're fun. They're like a good watch. They're a fun blockbuster summer type movie. The third one, I would give it like a 2.5 out of 5. It's still worth watching, especially if you've already committed to the first two. Thanks for watching this video. I think that's it for me for this week. Bye for now.